Hey, Mike.
Kathy, did you share your email with someone?
No, not that I'm aware of. It could be someone from my team who actually has that. We kind of have a group email that people can see. So I don't know if you can remove that person.
We can't without removing everybody with your name, including you. So I guess I would say is if you're logged in as Kathy, please log back out and then log in as an attendee. That would be very good. Thank you.
Hey, John.
Yeah.
There's a little ellipse here at the top that says we can hide non-video participants. If you hover over, you think that if we just hide that?
I didn't see that on my screen.
Oh,
So.
I just hit it. Do you see it still?
Oh, they just logged out. We're good.
Thank you. That's great.
Thank you very much. And it is 6:30, so let's go ahead and get started if everyone's ready. Good evening. My name is John Forren. I'm the executive director of Miami University's Menard Family Center for Democracy. And on behalf of the university and our partners at the Journal News and the League of Women Voters of Oxford, it's my pleasure to welcome you to tonight's debate featuring 3 candidates who are running to represent Ohio's 4th Senate District in the Ohio General Assembly. The winner of this race will replace incumbent Senator Bill Coley, who is term limited, and will represent most of Butler County in the Ohio Senate for a 4-year term that will begin next January. First, let me thank tonight's participating candidates, Democratic Party nominee Kathy Wyenandt, Republican Party nominee George Lang, and certified write-in candidate Kent Keller for joining us for tonight's discussion. Each candidate will be introducing themselves momentarily. Let me also introduce my fellow moderators for tonight's debate, Jennifer Fisher, who is co-president of the League of Women Voters of Oxford, and Michael Pitman, who covers local politics and community affairs for the Journal News. So tonight's debate will begin with brief opening statements by each of the candidates, who will speak in the order determined a few minutes ago by chance. After these candidate statements, then we'll move to roughly 60 minutes of questions, which will touch on a wide range of issues that are likely to face the state of Ohio in the next few years. The candidates have agreed to adhere to time limits on their answers so that we can cover a broad array of topics during our discussion. And each candidate will deliver a brief closing statement at the end. So now, without further ado, let's go ahead and turn to the candidates' opening statements, up to 2 minutes each. And first to speak will be Ms. Wyenandt.
Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Kathy Wyenandt, and I'm running for state senate because the career politicians we have representing us are not fighting for working families. I'm an Ohio native, a graduate of Fairfield High School and Miami University, and my background is in sales and management. My husband, Jim, and I are small business owners and parents of 4 kids, and I've been involved in the community for years, from the schools to local politics. But running for office wasn't always in my plans. In 2011, a 3rd Lakota school levy in a row failed. This meant that we had to pay a lot extra for our kids to play sports. We lost a lot of really good teachers to job cuts, and we were one of hundreds of families who lost busing. So in 2013, I joined the Levy Campaign Committee, and I learned a lot about the way we fund schools in Ohio. Our system over-relies on property taxes, and that's a burden for a lot of people, but it also creates inequities between districts. So 23 years after the first time the Supreme Court told us to fix it, we're still waiting. That's why I decided to run for the State House in 2018, and what still drives me every single day. Our kids deserve the best education our state can offer, and frankly, Ohio is letting them down. Now we're living through a pandemic and facing a tough economy, and our State House is mired in corruption. Every day, I talk to people whose lives have been impacted by COVID, whether it's losing a job or a loved one, or they're adjusting to challenges around school and work. We need leaders who understand what we're going through and who will work for the things that we care about, like getting more people back to work, meaningful work, safely, and building back an economy that works for everyone, and like making sure that insurance companies don't drive our healthcare decisions, and like finally fixing our school funding process and investing in public schools, because quality schools lead to a strong economy. Instead of playing politics, we need to get back to common sense. I'm Kathy Wyenandt, and I ask for your vote for State Senate.
Thank you, Mr. Lang.
Hi, my name is George Lang. I'd like to thank Miami University. I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters and Journal News for hosting this event tonight. And I'd like to thank my two opponents for participating in a political process. Look, 2020 has been a remarkable year. The COVID flu and government's reaction to it has wreaked havoc on our nation and our state. We have a lot of work to do to fix this mess, and I believe that I'm uniquely qualified to help lead our state out of the mess that we are in. I'm not a politician. I'm a business guy. I own 5 businesses, 4 of them domiciled in Butler County. I know what it takes to get the economy back on track. While I was a township trustee in Westchester, Westchester became the most affluent community in the state and the #1 community in which to live, according to Money Magazine. What did we do? We created a community where businesses could thrive. We had lower property taxes, we had no income or earnings tax, and we had simpler regulations so a business could come here and make more money than going anywhere else. The formula is not complicated. Butler County as a whole has figured this out. Our county is about to become the only county in the state that is debt-free. I want to take the Butler County model to the state of Ohio. It is much needed. 50 years ago, Ohio was rocking and rolling. We were the land of economic opportunity where businesses flourished and the average Ohioan made 10% more than the average American. 50 years ago, we implemented the income tax, not just on individuals, but on profits of corporations combined with one regulation after another. And today, Ohio is the 5th most left state in the nation, not from an ideological perspective, but from people physically, literally leaving the state. And today, the average Ohioan makes 10% less than the average American. Our state policies have driven businesses away and people are going where the jobs are. I insist on a state where businesses and people flourish and prosper. I insist on a state where our schools are safe and our first responders are protected. And I look forward to continuing my service for Butler County.
Thank you, Mr. Keller.
Hello, my name is Kent Keller of Miami University and the League of Women Voters for this invitation. Also to Kathy and George. I was born and raised in Butler County, Ohio. I'm the son of a steel worker. I'm also the grandson of an iron worker who still holds patents with the AK Steel Corporation. I attended trade school. I also have 27 certifications with OSHA. I retired as a senior project manager from the airline industry and from the transportation industry. I've had installations in over 20 countries worldwide. I'm a small business owner with agricultural contracts with University of Kentucky and the Kentucky Horse Park for over 25 years. I'm the husband and father of 2 sons, a grandfather of 8. I was involved in foreign missions director as a one-time overseeing 1 million in revenue to over 10 world countries. I'm a Christian conservative. I also am the only person who hasn't run in any election. I'm not a politician. I've never taken a dollar of speculation interest money. I am a former businessman, a farmer, a small business owner. I attended the city schools. I know what the voters want in a senator. They want honor, and I will appreciate your vote. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Now we turn to our questions for the candidates, and we begin with a question for all three candidates from Mike Pitman.
All right, great. Thank you very much for attending here, and thank you all the people who are watching this. This is very unique and very interesting tonight. So first, we'd like to start off with discussing a series of 3 questions about state education in Ohio. First, let's address the way in which Ohio funds its public schools, specifically Ohio's Supreme Court that's ruling 23 years ago in the DeRolf case that said that the way Ohio funds its schools primarily through property tax is unconstitutional. Yet, despite this ruling, the state continues to rely on a significant degree of local property tax for funding for K through 12 schools. Could each of you explain your view on a view of what the state legislature should do about these issues? And please be specific. Do you have a plan to change how the issue is handled in Ohio law? Kathy, we'll go with you.
Yes, definitely. So this is certainly something that clearly, if you heard my opening statement, is one of the main reasons why I even got into this process in the beginning. We know that quality schools build a strong economy. We need a high quality education no matter our zip code. And yes, you're right, 23 years ago, the first DeRolf case came out, and there have been 3 since. And we have done very little but kick the can down the road in terms of fixing our school funding process here in Ohio. Our over-reliance on property taxes not only is a burden, but it sets up a lot of inequities between districts. So there is a good proposal in the State House right now. It's HB 305, the Cupp and Patterson bill. It's a good start, but it's not great. And what that does is it actually determines the base cost for educating a student. What I really like about it is it proposes direct funding of charter schools so that we're not taking funding away from public schools. It increases funding for economically disadvantaged students, but there are some concerns around equity. So the revision is anticipated this fall, which hopefully will diversify some of those funding options to bring in other opportunities besides just property taxes.
Great, thank you very much. And we have a policy of Miss or Mr., and I apologize, Kathy, for Miss Wyenandt. So Mr. Keller, you're up next.
Currently, the schools have the money that they need now. The law is flawed, and we need to get rid of school cap system. It isn't fair. The Cupp-Patterson bill helps, but it's not perfect. Butler County has 16 unified school districts. Our governor needs to keep his hands off of the schools. We need to let parents, teachers, and the administration do their jobs in the elected school boards. In 1 week, the governor took all the power from the schools. Good schools equal people will stay in our county. People will move here, people will work here, students will return, and local participation soars when schools are good. Thank you.
Great. Just Mr. Keller, just if you can go a little closer to the mic. We heard you, but it was really faint. Mr. Lang, you're up. 1 minute.
Yeah, school funding is a very complicated topic, and Cupp-Patterson have been working extensively on this for a couple of years. Here's a problem I got with Cupp-Patterson and the work that they're doing. I've participated in some of the meetings. I've talked to people that have participated, and 100% of the participants of this are people that represent school districts. They're made up of union leaders, they're made up of treasurers, they're made up of superintendents. There's no one representing the business community or the taxpayer on these committees. So what I am proposing is that Cupp-Patterson continue the work they're doing, although obviously Cupp being speaker now, he will not be able to do all the heavy lifting on this, but they need to bring the business community in. They need to bring the taxpayers in. The reality is some schools are shrinking in size, and yet their budgets are still increasing. And COVID-19 is now showing public schools, hey, there are other ways to teach beside in person that may be as effective. Maybe they won't be, I don't know. We need to make sure we are being effective because we can't put businesses first without an educated workforce.
Okay, our next question is still on the subject of K through 12 education. Ohio's Ed Choice program and the older Cleveland Scholarship allows students who live within certain public school districts to receive taxpayer-funded tuition, scholarships, or vouchers for use at private or parochial schools. According to the Cincinnati Enquirer analysis in August, these programs have led to the diversion of $410 million in funds from public school districts in Ohio, all since 2018. As a state senator, do you plan to support the continuation of the Ed Choice and Cleveland Scholars Program over the next several years? And specifically, what changes, if any, would you like to see in these programs? 1 minute each, starting with Mr. Lang.
Yeah, I fully support Ed Choice. The problem we've got with Ed Choice right now is we are asking public schools to compete with handcuffs and shackles. So it's easy for some of these private schools or some of the new electronic schools to come in and offer a much lower cost and have fairly good results, but they're not forced to take the student that has English as a second language. They're not forced to take the student that has special ed needs. Public schools don't have any choice. They have to take those sectors. So as we are working on school choice, which I fully support, we have to figure out how to level the playing field. One other thing that public schools are unfairly treated in the Ed Choice world, if a public school wants to sell a building that they currently have because they're downsizing, they first have to sell it to a charter school. Even if that highest bid from a charter school is $1, they can't get the going rate. So there's things that we have to do to protect the public schools while we make sure we give those parents the freedom of choice.
The next is Ms. Wyenandt.
Well, look, over the last 20 years, close to $15 billion have been diverted from public schools with vouchers. So I do not support the current mode of Ed Choice. It hurts so many schools right here in Butler County, the way that we're determining what an Ed Choice building is. There are 36 buildings in Butler County that stand to lose significant funds if this stays in place. According to current criteria, about half of the schools in Ohio would be considered failing and voucher eligible. Look, the scholarship is not income-based, and that's a problem. And the student doesn't ever have to have attended public schools. They just need to live within that attendance zone, and that's a problem too. We need to disentangle funding from public school funding if we're going to fund private schools in any way, and we need to have public oversight. If they receive public dollars in any way, they need to be held accountable to the same standards as their public counterparts, like take all students, like require background checks, like report grades and test scores to the public, and like regular financial audits.
Okay, 1 minute, Mr. Keller.
I am a yes for Ed Choice. Ed Choice is good and fair. Scholarships benefit the poor and the minorities. Christian school parents pay both public and private tuition. In Lang's proposal, he's opposed to choice with his argument. Children belong to their parents, not the school, not the state. Vouchers help students and families, and the money needs to follow the student. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Let me follow up with a third and last question on education. I'd like to follow up with a question specifically about post-secondary education and college affordability in the state. Would each of you explain your views about whether Ohio's current level of financial support for public colleges and universities is where it should be, frankly? And more generally, what do you plan to do as a state senator to make college more affordable for people here in Butler County and throughout the state? And if you could each speak for 1 minute on this and start with Mr. Keller.
I can definitely confirm that secondary education is a viable and a good option. My son, Drew, started college when he was in the 10th grade. He is now an employee with the Department of Defense, works for the Air Force, and has continually expanded his education. So I can support that. Miami University was the provider for that. Future education is uncertain right now, and the money that is saved by this definitely benefits those students who need that help. so I can support secondary education.
All right, thank you. Mr. Lang?
Yeah, so Ohio does a lot as it relates to colleges and secondary education. We're actually the third highest funder of colleges in America. But the problem is colleges are not subject to the laws of supply and demand. And I blame the federal government for that and the student loan program that they have put in place and Pell Grants that I actually took advantage of when I went to school. They made it so that colleges were not subject to the laws of supply and demand. And the growth in colleges is higher than any other industry or sector in America. And it's unsustainable for us to continue this growth. So we have to get the government out of it, let the free market regulate it, and let the cost of colleges come down, because colleges are forced to lower their cost in order to compete. The other thing we have to do, we have to quit selling our kids that college is the only option. We need to bring back shop class. I was at a webinar last night, and lawyers today make as much as welders. There are welders that are making more than lawyers. So there are other options beside college, and we can't forget that.
All right, thank you. Ms. Wyenandt?
Yeah, you know what, George, you're right. There are other alternatives, and not everyone is it will be their most successful if they attend college. So certainly we have a shortage of labor in the trades, and we need folks who can go and do apprenticeships and go into the trades. It's very, very important. But look, Ohio is #2 in the nation with the highest student debt. That's really a challenge to saddle our kids with, and as they try to grow into adulthood here. We can do a lot of things. First of all, I would advocate increasing state basic funding. It's been significantly cut over recent decades. And look, we need to increase the Ohio College Opportunity Grant so that more people have the option to go to school. And we need to expand aid eligibility, both to include moderate income students and also part-time students. It's really important that more people have the opportunity to attend college if that is their plan and their goals.
Thank you.
Great. So we're gonna be switching topics here, and you'll notice a trend of switching topics pretty frequently here. But I like to move on to the issue of gun regulation. Earlier this month, Ohio Governor Mike DeWine renewed his push for gun control reform. He dubbed the measures back in 2019 as Strong Ohio, which proposed, among other things, that the state increase and improve background checks, prevent access to firearms for those deemed dangerous by a court, and increase penalties, criminal penalties for anyone who provides a firearm to someone legally prohibited from possessing one. 1 minute each, please talk about your support or non-support of DeWine's Strong Ohio proposals. Ms. Wyenandt, we'll start with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, to me, it's about common sense, right? I support the Second Amendment. I have my concealed carry permit. I am a gun owner. I also support common sense measures to prevent gun violence. The two don't have to be mutually exclusive or at odds with one another. We just need to have a little bit of common sense. Look, I think that we need universal background checks, period. Anytime a gun is purchased, I mean, obviously we're not going to get the illegal purchasing, that's a different issue, but anytime a gun is purchased, we need to have background checks. If you can't pass a background check because you beat your wife, you shouldn't have a firearm, right? And 90% of Ohioans agree with me on that. We also need to make sure that we can remove a firearm from the hands of someone who shouldn't have them. Suicides are on the rise in Ohio, and domestic violence is a very serious concern. So with due process going through a court, we should be able to enact extreme risk protection orders, or even a pink slip, as Governor DeWine says.
Great. Mr. Keller, you're up. 1 minute.
I'm a 100% supporter of the Second Amendment and our right to carry and defend ourselves. I am a big game hunter, so I own several guns. I also carry open and I carry concealed. However, I do know that my opponents have backed the governor's plan with red flag law. It is in writing, it is on video. I do not support any new gun regulations that there would be put in place for gun owners. The laws are already on the books. Follow the laws, put those people in jail when they are given due process. we do not need any more gun regulations in Ohio. I would like to see us also pass stand your ground law and constitutional carry in Ohio. I will fight for that when I become the next senator. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Mr. Lang, you're up. 1 minute.
As one who is endorsed by the National Rifle Association, Buckeye Firearms, and Dick Heller, and if you don't know who Dick Heller is, go Google Heller versus Washington, D.C. I am proud to be a strong supporter of the Second Amendment. Not to mention, one of the businesses that I own is in the Second Amendment world, and it protects legal, law-abiding gun owners. Having said that, I do not support stronger background checks. And I was asked one time, would I support red flag laws? And my sarcastic answer was, yeah. If you could show me one that protects the individual from an overzealous court system, from an ex-wife seeking revenge, I think I could come around to supporting something, but nothing like that exists. I do not support red flag laws in any way. Now, the reality is we already have red flag laws in Ohio today. Here's the way it works. The way it works in Ohio today, we take the crazy person or the alleged crazy person away from the situation. We don't remove the guns. The reality is more people are killed from a crazy person with a baseball bat than they are with a gun. So the way the red flag laws work in Ohio today is all we need. We just need to enforce them.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to ask each of you about your views on climate change. It's an issue that's been in the news a lot lately in light of the recent wildfires out west and the very active hurricane season that we are seeing in the Atlantic. First, do you believe that human activity is contributing to climate change? And if so, what new state laws, if any, would you like to see enacted to address this issue here in Ohio? Mr. Keller, first, 1 minute, please.
I would not enact any new state laws. The fires in California are arson fires. Has the climate changed? The climate hasn't changed much since I've been a kid. It snows in the winter and it gets hot in the summertime. So me personally, I've been above the equator, I've been below the equator, I've been above the to the north slopes, and there's always been a warming, cooling. We've had 4 seasons. I'm not a proponent of climate change. So no, we do not need any new state laws.
Okay, thank you. Next, Mr. Lang, 1 minute, please.
Yeah, so the question you asked first, do people contribute to climate change? I think that's unequivocally and empirically yes. However, I think the effect that people contribute to it is infinitesimal in relation to what Mother Nature does to itself and what it's been doing for billions and billions of years. And quite honestly, I think cow flatulence contributes more to climate change and than what humans do. So yeah, people do contribute. I think it's infinitesimal. And I think whatever we do in America, if we do anything, it doesn't matter because we're less than 1%. If we don't get China or India to change, whatever we do will not have a significant impact. So I do not support any laws that would further bring climate change regulations and put handcuffs and shackles on our businesses in Ohio.
Next, Ms. Wyenandt, 1 minute, please.
Well, look, scientists definitely they tell us over and over that humans have had an impact on the changing climate and that we can have an impact, although they're saying it's not too late. But look, first of all, what we can do is elect a state senator who cares about the environment and is willing to work to diversify our energy portfolio. Renewable energy is an absolute investment in our future. So one of the first things we need to do is change our energy policy and begin to shift to renewable energy and diversify that energy portfolio. Think about it like this. There are so many business opportunities to grow our economy here in Ohio, and we all ought to be on board with that. We could potentially create thousands and thousands of jobs here in Ohio and compete with neighboring states who are already on top of this. We need to start by repealing House Bill 6. We can invest in manufacturing and maintenance of solar panels and windmills, expand the tax credits for solar, wind, and electric vehicles and energy efficiency. And we can bolster support for innovation and partnerships and expand the scope of the Clean Ohio Fund.
All right, thank you. I have a question about healthcare, if we can switch to that topic. And this is a pretty complex question ultimately. So maybe we could give each candidate a couple of minutes to talk about this. On November 10th, which is a week after the election, the US Supreme Court will hear arguments in a case challenging the entirety of the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare, including its protections for pre-existing medical conditions, its expansion of Medicaid, and its mandate that children can stay on parents' insurance until age 26. So if the court in that case does indeed strike down Obamacare, which a number of court watchers are now predicting might happen in light of Justice Ginsburg's recent passing away, and it's very likely that healthcare will be a major issue on your desk as a state senator as early as next year. So given that context, and this is the complicated part of the question, if you could please explain what you will support as our representative in the state Senate in Columbus. For one, will you support state legislation that would reinstate Obamacare's coverage for pre-existing conditions? Will you support requiring insurance companies to cover dependents until the age of 26? Will you vote to maintain the expansion of Medicaid in Ohio that was facilitated by the Affordable Care Act? And more generally, if you would like to see a different kind of regulatory framework entirely in the state of Ohio, what would that look like? Can you explain that? And again, please take up to 2 minutes to answer that because that's a lot. So if we could start with Mr. Lang.
Yeah, so that was a lot there. I tried to make some notes. If I don't answer everything, John, please throw it back to me at the end. I'm not a big fan of Obamacare. Don't like it. I think it's government interfering with the markets. I believe free markets and free peoples are the greatest regulator, and that's what has regulated America for their first primarily 150 years or so, and it's what made us the most prosperous nation in the world. So for the most part, I'm against government interference and government mandates. I do have a few exceptions. I think pre-existing conditions is a fair one. The problem you have with it, though, think how crazy it would be for someone to not have insurance on their house, and all of a sudden it catches on fire. And now I'm calling the insurance company and I'm expecting them to underwrite me and pay my bills. So I understand both sides of this argument. I can see it. I do think pre-existing conditions does make sense. I'm opposed to forcing insurance companies to pay for dependents until they're 26. I believe free markets and free peoples. I believe there are insurance companies that would take this on, because from an actuarial perspective, where covering those with pre-existing conditions is extremely expensive for insurance companies, covering those under the age of 20 up until 26 is not a very expensive undertaking. Your primary risk is a female getting pregnant, and especially one that has a premature baby. So that's the primary risk there. The cost is not very high. That's what would I support an expansion of Medicaid? I would not. The current Medicaid expansion we have was done by, as the legislator said no. John Kasich did it with executive order. And here's the problem we've got. And Ohio is driving businesses away. We are now the 5th most left state in the nation. One of the reasons businesses are leaving is the cost of doing business in Ohio. 50 years ago, the cost of state government, 5% of GDP. Today, it's 14%. And that doesn't count the Medicaid expansion that's going to be hitting our budget here shortly. So in the last 50 years, our funding source has grown at 1,800%. We've grown at 5,330%. We're outgrowing our funding source. It's unsustainable. The insanity has to stop.
All right, thank you. Ms. Wyenandt?
So I talk to voters a lot throughout the district, and it seems like inevitably one of the top concerns is always healthcare, especially out-of-pocket costs and hassles and hoops that we have to jump through for certain procedures and medications. Look, the fact of the matter is that healthcare is an economic issue. The cost for business owners, the cost for the farmers, the cost for the families, people with chronic conditions, it's a very serious issue for all of us. I will work to expand access to affordable, quality healthcare, including mental health care and addiction treatment here in Ohio. And one of the first things we should do is to codify protection for coverage of pre-existing conditions, especially in light of the SCOTUS case that's coming up. We need to make sure that we can reduce out-of-pocket costs for necessary prescriptions like EpiPens that my daughter has to have. We have to jump through a lot of hoops to get those filled. We should require PBMs, pharmacy benefit managers, not just for public coverage like Medicaid, but also for private coverage to be transparent and pass on savings to the patients. I will work to achieve mental health care parity. There are currently 2 bipartisan bills stalled in committee at the state level that would pair cost of mental health coverage with primary care coverage. And look, I'll work to protect Ohio's Medicaid expansion. We have 700,000 more Ohioans that have coverage in Ohio. And look, those people are folks who are senior citizens, children. It's been integral in our fight against the opioid epidemic. It goes towards to paying for detox centers and long-term care centers. It's very, very important. I would also advocate and support, yes, continuing to cover our dependents until they're 26. We just talked about the difficulty of college graduates getting jobs, and absolutely it's very important that we expand coverage and protect those priorities from the ACA.
Great, thank you very much. Mr. Keller?
I am a no on Obamacare. It doesn't work. It hasn't worked. Millions have inferior health care now. The private health care, no government interference. Government cannot manage health care. They never have been able to. As far as the law that could take place, of course, that centers around the Supreme Court justice decision, and it would go to a lower court if the Supreme Court does not make a decision on that. We've seen the problem with the virus shortcomings with government getting involved. So I am no forced government mandates. As Mr. Lang mentioned, I am a no on extending to age 26. Let the private healthcare handle that. Let people choose their own insurance and not government. We need to shrink big pharma and hospital costs. Those need to be transparent. The Ohio budget is 43% of that is Medicaid. It involves the elderly, the infirm, children, and the poor. And rather than cut programs to the bone, I believe we should make departments more efficient by auditing and evaluating budgets and administrative personnel. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right, switching gears again here. We're going to go to HB 6, the issue with the green energy here. So I have a couple questions about that. First, on the campaign finance side of this story, the recent allegations of the use of the 501c4 organizations to funnel corporate money to the former speaker and his allies are, if true, a prime example of how dark money can fuel corruption if in government. In light of this scandal, do you believe that Ohio's campaign finance laws need to be reformed? And if so, what specific forms would you support? We're going to have 1 minute each, and we're going to have 1 minute for the second question that we're going to have on this. So Ms. Wyenandt, you're up.
Yeah, look, it's imperative that we restore public confidence in public servants, right? Our government has to be solely accountable to the governed, we the people. Pay to play influences our economy. It's crony capitalism. It's picking winners and losers. And crony capitalism, I would argue, is the single greatest threat to free market capitalism. Look, 25 years of one-party rule has led to corruption and unaccountability. Career politicians who are not working for us. We need to clean it up. One of the things that we can do is pass the Ohio Anti-Corruption Act, which is House Bill 739, which closes dark money loopholes and requires any entity that spends money to influence an election to disclose the source of funds and report all expenditures. That includes super PACs and independent expenditure groups. We need to require transparency. And we also need to get on the ending gerrymandering, where politicians pick their voters and draw districts that are safe, because that leads to extremism, corruption, and bribery attempts.
Mr. Keller, 1 minute.
I cannot express how disappointed I was with the HB6 passage. We were totally against that. It was a bailout from the beginning. Every representative that voted on that knew that it was a bailout from the beginning. All the ones that took the corrupt money from it knew that it was corrupt money. So I'm against that. People did that to get reelected. They're raising money to get reelected. And I was against that. As far as those that took the money and said that they would give back to charity, I haven't seen any of that go on yet. I am reluctant to make any statements about that since there are FBI investigations going on. However, I intend to hold those that took that money and used it in campaigns for their benefit. So I would like to see a repeal of HB6. And if it doesn't happen in this legislation, I would bring that up in.
Thank you very much, Mr. Keller. Mr. Lang, 1 minute.
Your question was about dark money, so I'm going to focus on that. And I agree with Kathy on this. We have to be transparent. Every contribution that goes to every campaign has to be known. It has to be out there. People have to know who's funding it. Would House Bill 6 have passed had the legislators know there was over $60 million being funded directly and indirectly for House Bill 6? A lot of the funding was indirectly. I don't think it would have passed. I don't know. There's a lot of good in House Bill 6, so maybe it would have passed regardless of that, but it may not. The fact is, we didn't know. Nobody knew. The citizens deserve to know. The legislators deserve to know. So I do think we need to be transparent, and all C4s should disclose who their funding is. We, as elected officials, have to disclose every penny we get and how we spend it. And I think the same should be for all political causes.
Great. Now we're going to continue on this. As I said, this is a two-part question, but now we're going to look at the substance of HB6 itself, that law that passed in 19, and it provides about $1 billion of subsidies for 2 nuclear power plants in Northern Ohio. It cuts back dramatically on Ohio's renewable energy and energy efficiency standards. So what is your position on what should be done with HB6? Do you support what HB6 did with respects to the subsidies for nuclear and coal-fired power plants? That is a mouthful there. And do you think that Ohio should do more to promote renewable energy and the growth of jobs in that sector? And we're going to go in the same order. Ms. Wyenandt, you're up. 1 minute.
Well, absolutely, we ought to repeal House Bill 6. It was a corrupt bill. We've already established that because of and I don't agree that it was problematic because it was a bailout of one private company, and that's picking favorites, and that goes against everything that we stand for. Look, the utility ratepayers are saddled with paying for this $1 billion bailout over a period of 6 years. Their average utility bills are going to go up every month. And look, they're dragging their feet on repealing this. I don't know. Supposedly there's going to be some hearings coming up this week. I don't know. There's a lot of back and forth. The dark money that's flowing from this is still problematic. We should be diversifying our energy portfolio. We need, the most important part to me is that we gutted our clean energy standards out of this. It's going to cost Ohio job opportunities and economic development opportunities. If we welcomed clean energy, we really could grow an estimated of 20,000 jobs and attract an estimated $25 billion in investments over the next 2 decades, not to mention what it does for our environment.
All right, great. Mr. Keller, 1 minute.
HB6 is a bailout. It was a bailout. We need a whole new bill. It needs to be repealed. I support the idea, but not the agenda. costs every Ohioan $125 per person. As far as the transparency that we're talking about raising money. The money received to date from good old boys clubs, bailout packs, kickback donors. George Lang has $745,000 of that kickback money. It's all to get reelected, all of those things. We need this stuff revealed. I knew it, and I wasn't in the legislature, that HB 6 was a bailout, and I knew it the minute that they started getting donations into their accounts and showing up on campaign finance reports. So be transparent, be fully transparent. And I am against HB 6. I want to.
Great. Mr. Lang?
When HB 6 first came out, I wasn't a no, I was a hell no, because it was exactly what my opponents have said. It was a bailout for the nuclear plant. However, we worked to make it better, and it became a bailout for the ratepayers. This actually lowers ratepayers' bills. Had House Bill 6 not gone into place, the average ratepayer in Ohio would be paying $9 per month for Strickland green mandates, betting on future things, not even on historical or significant things. However, we replaced it with a $3 per month bailout for the nuclear plants. I don't know what Mr. Keller is talking about, 745. I think he's talking about the money I received. I'm proud that I have such broad support from so many business. In addition to reducing the ratepayers' cost $2.3 billion over the life of the fund, I was lobbied by GE Aviation and AK Sealing to support this bill, because where it saves the average ratepayer is about $80 a month, for our businesses and our corporations making things in Ohio, the savings is millions of dollars a year. Hey, the other thing, I'm proud that it's sunset after 6 years. I wish every single law we passed had a sunset on it.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Lang.
Okay, let's move on. I'm going to ask you 3 questions, yes or no questions, about how the governor has handled the coronavirus pandemic. At that point, I'm going to follow up with a more general question. So the first, and the order will be Keller, Mr. Lang, Ms. Wyenandt. The first one, should Ohio have shut down in March 2020? Yes or no? Mr. Keller.
No.
Ms. Wyenandt.
I think, yes, we didn't know what was going on, but then we could have opened back up. Sorry.
Okay, the next question. Do you agree with our statewide mask mandates? Mr. Keller.
No.
Mr. Lang.
No.
Ms. Wyenandt.
Yes.
Do you believe that the director of the Ohio Department of Health has too much power under current law while issuing public health mandates? Yes or no? Mr. Keller.
Yes.
Mr. Lang.
Yes.
Ms. Wyenandt.
No.
Now, my next question is going to be more general. What do you think the state's approach to the pandemic should be going forward? For instance, should bars and restaurants be closed if the numbers of cases in Ohio spikes again in the fall? Should schools be open for in-person instruction? Generally speaking, what approach should the governor and the state legislature take to this public health crisis? 2 minutes each, starting with Mr. Keller.
Government doesn't have the power or authority to tell you what to eat, what to wear, how to wear it, where to go, or when to go. Let the people decide. We aren't children. The businesses can decide how they want to open their businesses. They should be deciding that. The state of South Dakota has proven that that holds true. The people should make that decision. As far as schools, the schools are run by boards, they're run by the parents, and they should be the ones that are making these decisions. That is their job. The government has no place in that business. The loss of revenue has been atrocious. Thank you.
2 minutes, Mr. Lang.
Yeah, I do not think bars and restaurants should be closed or inhibited. The devastation that has happened, and it's not so much to the owners, it's the employees. Those are the people that are really getting hurt. As someone who owns a restaurant and a bar, I understand exactly what I'm saying when I say that. I do not think bars and restaurants should be closed. Here's what I want the government to do. I want them to tell us, these are what we perceive the risk to be. Here's what we think you ought to do, and then get the hell out of the way and let us decide how we want to live our lives. My entire family, myself, my wife, and my 80-plus-year-old mother-in-law who lives with us have all had it. And because of my recent battle, or I should say my current battle with cancer, they're very worried about me. But for me, it was a fairly insignificant event. And by the way, one of my cancer practitioners told me, do not wear a mask. She said, as you're recovering, you need to breathe fresh air. You can't be breathing your carbon monoxide over and over again. As it relates to school boards, I trust the boards, the administration, and the unions at the local level to know best what to do and how to do it. I do not trust the state to have a one-size-fits-all mandate for all of these schools. What direction should the state take? I think we are, as legislatures, are obligated to take away some of the authority that the governor and the state health director have in this regard. They are acting on a law that was passed in 1908. And I'm sure it made a lot of sense then, because in 1908, if you had an emergency, it may take a couple days for your legislator to get to Columbus and help make a decision. But today we have this technology we're using now. We have Zoom, we have all of this updated transportation. And for us to get together and make a decision in a short timing in an emergency is not an undoable thing like it might have been in 1908. The current law we're proposing gives the health director 14 days. It cannot extend beyond 14 days without legislative approval.
Okay, thank you. 2 minutes, Ms. Wyenandt.
So look, in March, there was so much we didn't know, so much that scientists and health professionals didn't understand about COVID, right? So of course we shut down because we looked at best practices. We looked at what happened around the globe and what happened in history with the influenza pandemic 100 years ago, and they acted based upon that. But look, this pandemic has become political, and shame on our leaders for not leading. We shouldn't have to have a mask mandate, because our leaders should all be setting the example and wearing masks and saying, hey, if the science tells us that this helps us from spreading our own germs to you, then we should be wearing a mask. We shouldn't need a mandate, right? I get freedom, but with freedom comes great personal responsibility. And one of the best ways to help our businesses thrive and be successful and to keep our economy going is to wear a mask and reduce the spread. I mean, I don't love them. I don't enjoy wearing them, but I'm doing my part. I am concerned with efforts to remove or curtail the authority of the health director to issue orders during a pandemic. That doesn't make sense to me. This, to me, is the very definition of putting politics over people, and that is misguided. Look, Ohio spends less per capita on public health than all but 3 states. It's part of the reason we're in this position here. What we need to do is invest in public health and make sure that we are prepared in the future. We don't need schools to shut down. Our school boards are doing a wonderful job. My kids are in school in person in Lakota, and we also have a virtual learning option. They're doing a wonderful job. But again, it comes down to compliance and common sense and following some guidelines and making sure that everyone is doing that. We're keeping distancing in place and just doing the best we can. Our businesses are definitely hurting. People are hurting. A lot of people have lost their jobs. So we need to have common sense with how we do this and keep our businesses open. I don't think a 10 o'clock time frame is arbitrary. It's not good for our business. So I think we can do both. We can take care of our economy and take care of public health. They're not mutually exclusive. We just need leaders to lead on that.
All right, thank you. Let's shift gears again to a different topic. And let me ask each of you about our criminal justice system here in Ohio. First, do you believe that there is systemic racism in our criminal justice system? And what specific changes in state law, if any, would you support in order to address public concerns about racial profiling, racial prejudice, and racial injustice in this arena? Ms. Wyenandt, 1 minute, please.
Well, absolutely. I do believe that racism is a public health crisis, and you need to look no further than for evidence to no further than the disproportionate impact that the COVID-19 has had in Black communities. Look at infant mortality. It's 2.5 to 3 times higher in the Black community. There's unemployment disparities, wealth disparities, disproportionate poverty rates. It's absolutely a very, very serious problem. And we have to acknowledge that and look into it. But look, I don't favor defunding the police by any means. And I understand there are frustrations around excessive use of force and profiling. I'm really proud to say that I've been endorsed by the Ohio Fraternal Order of Police in this race. And I have to tell you, if anybody's been defunding the police, it's been the Republican supermajority over the last 10 years, as they have been systematically stripping local government funds, which funds police. I think what we can do is to make sure that we look at the way our criminal justice model in Ohio. We need to reimagine punishments for lower level misdemeanors, and we need to make sure that our police force is at the table as we find common solutions to reducing some of this excessive force and some of the problems in our communities.
Thank you. Mr. Keller?
No, I am not for defunding the police. I am for empowering law enforcement. There is not a public health crisis. I have never slandered the Westchester Police Department. I believe that we should raise the salaries of law enforcement, and we are losing officers. As for the health officials, there are 32,000 employed in Butler County. So they've had pay increases 6.5%. So we should be empowering law enforcement. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Lang?
Hey, your question, if I understand it, was around criminal justice and what reforms, not defunding the police. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so there's a lot of criminal justice reforms going on, and I am leading the Republican effort, and it's all bipartisan. America leads the world in percent of population incarcerated. Here's a statistic that should shock everybody. America's 4% of the population, 25% of the world's incarcerated. Ohio is number 4 in America in terms of percentage of people incarcerated. That has a huge negative effect on our workforce development. So to me, it's an economic development opportunity. I believe in general, jails should be reserved for the violent offenders. We have to stop locking up people that we're pissed off at and only lock up those people that really scare the you-know-what out of us. So I am working on significant reforms with Democrats, Senate Bill 3, Senate Bill 10. There's several House bills that have come out of my committee, all aimed at criminal justice reform and making sure we lock up the violent offenders, but trying to reform the others.
Thank you. Mike?
Sorry, I had to find my mute button. So we've seen a lot of support and opposition to the Black Lives Matter movement in recent months, as well as a cry for some groups, as we said, to defund the police. But let's not focus on that. Let's focus on the protests here. What should the state government's role be in these protests that have arisen in response to deaths of persons of color? Mr. Lang, we'll start with you. 1 minute.
Yeah, our Constitution protects the right to peacefully assemble. It protects the right to address your elected officials. It protects that right, and we need to make sure that right is protected. But I'm telling you, all too often the line is crossed, and I think it's being crossed primarily for political purposes. And we have to stop that. We have to punish those people that are violently protesting, those people that are attacking our police, those people that are destroying our buildings, those people that are burning our small businesses. Those people are out of control. And our Constitution does not protect those people. You want to peacefully assemble, you want to peacefully protest, I fully support your right to do that. I was at the Trump rally yesterday, and he reminded us all, we are not at a rally, we are at a peaceful protest. And that's what we have to protect. But the violence has to be stopped, Mike. I think the violence has to be punished, and I think those people should pay a penalty for their acts of violence as is outlined in the law today.
Great. Ms. Wyenandt, you're up. 1 minute.
So Look, violence is not okay. Protesting is absolutely critical to the foundation of our very government. It's how we ended up here with the democracy that we have. So it's always a good thing to have peaceful protests, but never violence. And George is right. I mean, so many businesses have suffered as a result of some of the violence that's come out, and a lot of those are Black-owned businesses, and that's a problem. You know, I'm not here to say who that was doing the violence, but I will say that the government's response needs to be to help to de-escalate those situations. And I don't think throwing tear gas or bringing tanks into the situation makes things any better. So I do think we have a lot of work to do collectively as a state and as a government to figure out the best way to bring those down, because we need to listen to people, but we don't need to show up at a peaceful protest with riot gear in hand. Sometimes that does sort of escalate the process in and of itself.
All right, thank you very much. Mr. Keller, 1 minute.
Well, you're talking to a person that has had multiple protests at their own home. So I have greeted the protesters, and I have welcomed their conversation. So I support peaceful protests. I do. However, you must obey the laws. Everyone is treated the same by the Constitution. I support peaceful demonstrations. The thing is, when they get out of control, you must arm lawful citizens. It can be a gun issue. Armed people create peaceful states. This is a republic. It is not a democracy. I support the First Amendment, the freedom of speech. So yes, I do support legal protest. They must be safe. We must keep our citizens safe.
Great, thank you very much.
Okay, the Ohio legislature is working on a ban that would block local governments from banning plastic bags, as well as plastic straws, disposable utensils, aluminum cans, glass bottles, styrofoam cups, and carry-out containers. Do you support this ban? Please comment on whether this is an infringement on home rule. 1 minute, starting with Mr. Keller.
Well, I don't support any ban or any mandate by the government. The government doesn't have the power nor the authority to tell you what to eat, what to wear, what to put in a bag, what not to put in a bag, where to go, where to take your bag. So no, I am not for a government mandate on plastic bags.
So just to clarify that this is a ban blocking local governments from a ban.
The government has no right to mandate in the private sector.
Okay, 1 minute, Mr. Lang.
Yeah, I do support this. This is auxiliary containers, and it's a very important part of economic development. Ohio has over 6,000 different taxing jurisdictions. Think about that. We have more than any other state, more than California, New York, Illinois, New Jersey. We are number one. And when a business looks at where they are going to relocate, the cost and complexity associated with doing business in that state is one of the things that businesses look at. And if you have a business on one corner and another business on another corner, and the rules are so diametrically different, the cost associated with doing business for you makes that cost high. And it's why Ohio is one of the 5th most left states in the nation. Businesses are not coming here. And this is especially true as in the world of COVID, because many stores are now outlawing, not the government, the stores, reusable bags. They want you to use those plastic bags that are disposable. And this is a job saver. There are 3 plants in Ohio that create these bags, including one here in Butler County. I support the local economy.
Okay, can you give me yes or no on whether it's an infringement on home rule?
We have a legal opinion that it does not from Voorhees. So this does not infringe on home rule, and I can forward that to you tomorrow if you'd like, Jennifer.
Okay, thank you. 1 minute for Ms. Wyenandt.
Well, I do think that anytime you start to tell local governments what they can do, that is an erosion of home rule. And I know, George, you wrote this bill. This is your baby. So I certainly don't mean to insult you here, but I do think that local electeds, local communities know best what their communities need and what they will tolerate and what their market will sustain. So I don't think you should just go on about changing the structure of the government just because you don't like something or because a special interest that gives you money tells you they don't like something. I think that's a problem. Look, businesses' top concerns, what I'm reading, businesses' top concerns is economic insecurity in Ohio and the cost of healthcare. I haven't heard anything about banning plastic bags in Ohio. So I think that this is a misguided law and it's just a favor for.
All right, thank you. This will be the last question before we move to closing statements. So let me ask a question a little more broad than the issue-specific questions we've asked so far. This is a more general question about how you'll approach your job as a state senator if you're elected. So let me pose the question this way. So campaigns and debates like this are all about individual candidates taking positions, drawing contrasts with their opponents. But the actual job of lawmaking is different because in the state legislature, in the state Senate, you'll have to work with 32 other senators who all have their own views on issues, have their own constituencies at home throughout Ohio. So given that, could you talk a little bit about each of you about the role of compromise in the state legislature ultimately? And could you give a specific example of a time either in government or in your lives in some other context where you have engaged in compromise in order to reach a solution to a problem? Or if you could talk about a time where you changed your mind after listening to somebody who you initially disagreed with. So that's a lot. So a minute or so, and could we start with Ms. Wyenandt?
Yeah, that's a lot. Look, I think working in the state Senate, just like in any job and in any other committee or any role that you have, or even in your marriage, is all about compromise and building relationships. And for me, I really thrive when I surround myself with people who have differing opinions than my own. My own campaign team is comprised of Republicans, Trump supporters, Democrats, and very left-wing folks. I mean, we've got all the spectrums here. And so what I will tell you is that my goal as a state senator is to build relationships, build coalitions, find areas that we have things in common and what we can move forward together on. I may be working with a very conservative Republican on some bill and a very progressive Democrat on another. Compromise is extremely important. I serve on the SORTA board in Southwest Ohio, it's the Regional Transit Authority. And we recently compromised between the city and the county in order to get a big initiative passed, and that was bringing people together at the table and coming together about listening to concerns and issues and finding a middle ground that would benefit everybody. So it's pretty basic, but it really is about listening and finding common ground.
Thank you. Mr. Keller?
First of all, I'll stick to my convictions. I cannot be bought. I'm not for sale. I relish different opinions. I do. I was a project manager for 25 years, so I was well versed in communicating with other trades, working through differences and obstacles on projects. That's what I did my whole career. I'm a farmer, so yes, I can work with even the weather. So it makes no difference to me on that. I can cross the aisle, I can listen. However, I will not sell out. I can't be bought.
All right, thank you. Mr. Lang?
Yeah, my wife would tell you that I'm very adverse and very good at compromising. It seems like she always wins. We went to the puppy store about a week ago, and I strongly told her no, and now we have a new, fun, beautiful little puppy in our house. Listen, when you get in the legislature, you have to, you're not going to get everything you want. We're trying to get stand your ground bill passed. We're not going to get the version we want. We can get a version done, but not the version we want. The plastic bags bill we talked about earlier, it's a bipartisan. I worked with Democrats to get this bill passed, and the reason the Democrats support it is they see this tax local government's putting on it as an unfair tax on the poor, and they're right. But guess what? Kasich said he's not going to sign it that goes on into perpetuity. He will sign it if we put a sunset on it. So we are putting a sunset on it. We're concurring with the Senate, and we're going to get it voted out of the House tomorrow and get it on the governor's desk and hopefully signed by the end of this week with a sunset. You have to be willing to compromise. If you're not willing to compromise, there's a very little you're going to get done in Columbus.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And we are out of time for our question and answer portion. So we'll now move to closing statements. And by previous agreement, we'll go in reverse order of the opening statements. So that would be Mr. Keller first, then Mr. Lang, and then Ms. Wyenandt. So Mr. Keller, you have 2 minutes.
In my closing, I want you to know that I am running because people asked me to run. They want an honorable senator. People are tired of establishment politics and corruption at the Ohio State House. This nation is currently in a crisis. It's time for courage and conviction. If the voters send me to Columbus, my first act as senator will be to sign onto the impeachment bill of Governor Mike DeWine. He has gone too far and he's abused his office. My second act will be to further the introduction of the Stand Your Ground bill, which should be introduced by Jennifer Gross, the new representative for the 52nd. I will work alongside Ohio gun owners to get your Second Amendment rights in place during a time of unrest and uncertainty. Lastly, I will always make sure that religious liberty is at the forefront of our state's priorities. Not that everyone needs to be a Christian, but everyone's religious rights must be honored no matter what they are now. They must be exercised. I have a lifelong proven record of integrity. I know what it is like to be a working man, raising a family in this district and working multiple jobs. I know what it's like to face hardship and opposition. None of those things matter to me. I'm in this to win it, and if I don't, I'll be back again. I'm not deterred, and I am as tired of lying George Lang as everyone else. We need integrity restored to the State House, and you'll not have to vote that. If you elect a man who's taken kickback money, been investigated by the FBI, been sued by the Westchester Police Department, been sued for breach of contract, and is even now possibly preparing again for another FBI investigation, Butler County does not need that. I look forward to all that I can accomplish in Columbus, and I humbly ask for your vote. Write in Kent Keller.
All right. Thank you. Mr. Lang, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. I was born the grandson of a Cuban immigrant. I was not born George Lang. I was born George Fabian Fajardo. My mama had me 1 month after she turned 22 years old. I was her her fifth kid. My older sister, 7 years my senior. You can do the math. Shortly after I'm born, my dad, who's just a kid himself, takes off. My mom's left alone, 5 kids, 3 of us in diapers, no education, no marketable skills. She has a nervous breakdown, and I become a ward of the state and spend my early years in foster care. I know what it's like to grow up in tough times. By the way, my mom later went on to become a very powerful person. She and I actually graduated from college in the same year. But here's what I learned about the way I grew up. It's not where you start that counts, it's where you finish. And I've learned to believe in the power of the individual, not the power of the collective. And I believe that's what our forefathers had in mind when they created the greatest country the world has ever known, the United States of America. Ohio used to be the land of opportunity. We were the land of flights, the land of manufacturing, the land of economic power, the land of presidents. There's a 120-year period history in our country where 8 presidents came from Ohio. Now the best we can put forward is Kasich and Kucinich. So today, Ohio is in a decline, and that's evidenced by 50 years ago, we had 24 congressmen. Today we're down to 16. We know when the census comes out, we're going to 15, maybe 14. No other state in America is getting their ass kicked as bad as Ohio. My goal is to restore Ohio's economic vitality and to be, instead of the 5th most left state in the nation, one of the 5 most entered state in the nation within a decade. If you agree with me and you feel that as a people we are overburdened, overtaxed, overgoverned, and overregulated, then I humbly ask that you please vote for me on November 3rd. And I'm proud of my record as an elected official.
Thank you. Ms. Wyenandt.
This is an important election, and I am not referring to the presidential race. Maybe we are distracted by Washington, or maybe we're tired of politics, or maybe we're just too busy, but for far too long, many of us have ignored what happens in Columbus. And that is how we've ended up with self-serving career politicians who don't fight for us. My campaign is about us, right here in Butler County. I'm running for those who've achieved success and for those who feel forgotten. People over politics isn't just my tagline. It means that I will never prioritize my party or special interests over my neighbors here in Butler County. It's about common sense, values, balanced solutions. We're in the middle of yet another corruption scandal in Columbus, a $61 million bribery scheme, which led to millions of dollars being funneled into dark money groups to fund political campaigns like my opponents, all paid for by you and me on our utility bills. We need to stop sending the same enablers of corruption back to Columbus just because they have an R by their name. People here are ready for change. I am proud of the bipartisan support that we have in this race. We have Biden and Trump supporters in this coalition because we agree that our senators should care about working families more than climbing the political ladder. We need leadership willing to work across the aisle now and always to fight for the things that we care about, like building back an economy that works for everyone, like expanding access to affordable health care and fighting for good education for all students, no matter their zip code. Instead of playing politics, let's get back to common sense. Look, we may not agree on every single issue, but you can bet on the fact that my vote is not for sale. Integrity matters. Ethics matter. I'm Kathy Wyenandt, and I ask for your vote for State Senate.
All right, thank you. That concludes tonight's debate. On behalf of Miami University, let me thank our co-hosts for this event, the League of Women Voters of Oxford and the Journal News. And let me extend my own thanks to my co-moderators, Jennifer Fisher and Michael Pitman, for their efforts in bringing this debate to our community. Thank you as well to my son, Bryce, who's a student at Miami and is sitting right next to me and was the timer for the event. And I appreciate that a lot. And a big thank you to our candidates whose participation tonight in this debate represents their commitment to engaging with our community and to informing voters here in Butler County about the choices that we'll be making in November. And a reminder to our audience, if you haven't yet registered to vote, you have until October 5th to do that. Early voting starts on the 6th, and the election is Tuesday, November 3rd. So we encourage everyone to vote and to make their voices heard. So again, thank you very much for joining us, and we wish everybody a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.